In this edition of the Red and Blue Political Roundup, President Trump's lawyers say they've responded to special counsel Robert Mueller's request to interview the president. Mr. Trump's lead attorney, Rudy Giuliani, appeared on a radio show hosted by one of the president's other attorneys. You can't make this stuff up. Jay Sekulow, his show Wednesday, and both men confirmed they had responded to Mueller's request, but would not comment on the content of their response. Well, we turn to Politico reporter Lewis Nelson in Washington for more on what we might know about this. Giuliani told Politico on Tuesday that the president may actually answer questions on the topic of obstruction. There have been other reports that's a red line for the administration. They don't want the president talking about obstruction of justice. What do we know about this back and forth?
Well, Rudy Giuliani has been coy, I guess, a little bit about whether he's willing to or whether he would advise the president to sit for an interview with Robert Mueller. And on this question of obstruction, Mayor Giuliani has said or told my colleagues at Politico today that they're not so much concerned about particular specific questions about obstruction, but they're concerned about the Mueller's office, the questioners from Mueller's team, sort of giving the president, not the runaround, but setting perjury traps is the way that the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, has sort of said it. And so what Mayor Giuliani has said is that he's prepared to offer, or that they might be prepared to allow, limited questions, very specific questions that only the president can answer, things like that. Although Giuliani has said, has been pretty explicit that he is not, he would not advise the president to sit for this interview. It seems that the president, at least outwardly, is the person who's sort of pushing for an interview, pushing to clear his name.
We sit here 3 months away from the November elections. What are the political concerns about the timing of any possible interview?
Well, I think the White House and the president's legal team are certainly concerned that it could drag into the November elections. It's already sort of dragging into the November elections, and that it could have a detrimental effect on independent voters, swing voters, maybe people who voted for the president but have since sort of grown weary of all of these investigations and things like that. In addition to answering the Mueller team's questions about or their proposal about an interview with the president, Rudy Giuliani also said that their response to Mueller's office was to reiterate again this call for the investigation to be wrapped up expeditiously. They've continued to call for that. The White House has suggested in announcing the timing of a potential second meeting with Vladimir Putin that they expect the Mueller probe to be wrapped up by the end of the year. But that's all come from the White House. There hasn't been any indication from Mueller's team about when this might wrap up. And there's no deadline on it. It could go for weeks and months going forward.
You mentioned Vladimir Putin. Amid all this discussion of better relations with Russia, the news today that the administration will have some new sanctions in response to an assassination attempt against a former Russian spy who was living in the UK. What do we know about these sanctions, who they target, why they're happening now?
Well, the sanctions, like you said, have to do or are in response to this assassination last March, or attempted assassination rather, of a former Russian spy and of his daughter in the United Kingdom. If you can think back to when that initially happened, there was a good amount of outrage that the White House wasn't prepared to speak out quite as forcefully, at least initially, against Russia in identifying Russia as the likely culprit as the United Kingdom was. That the U.S. wasn't quite stepping up to have the back of its ally, the United Kingdom. I think these sanctions sort of speak pretty clearly to the split screen that has gone on with the Trump administration between the president's, very public warmth towards Vladimir Putin, his hesitancy to speak poorly of Russia, his hesitancy to blame Russia, and his willingness to accept Russia, Vladimir Putin rather's denial that Russia had nothing to do with the interference in the 2016 election. So there's that whole side, that comes directly from the president. And then there's the rest of the administration. Sarah Sanders comes out regularly at the White House podium to insist, no administration has been tougher on Russia than the Trump administration. The sanctions, they've closed 2 Russian consulates on the West Coast. They've expelled dozens of diplomats, things like that. So I think that these sanctions while they are in response to a specific event, will also allow the White House to bolster its claim that they actually have been tough on Russia, despite what the president himself has said.
Another topic, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. He met with North Korea's foreign minister Wednesday and reportedly told him the U.S. can't be trusted. Of course, this comes after the president took the U.S. out of the Iran nuclear deal. Is anyone meaningful or surprising or notable in Washington basically open to this argument of Rouhani's, that if one administration is going to back out of another administration's deals, then it makes it harder for Trump in North Korea or a future president with another foreign adversary to make a deal?
Well, this has been the argument for defenders of the Iran nuclear deal for a long time now, dating back to before the president pulled out of it, back when he was, sort of dancing around. There was a will he, won't he sort of a thing for a while, and the president sort of halfway pulled out of it and then wound up, doing the rest and pulling the rest of the way out of the deal. The argument from defenders of the deal, especially folks who worked in the Obama administration on the deal, who have been fairly public in defending it and arguing for its protection. The argument has gone something like, if the U.S. starts backing out of these deals, especially multilateral deals with allies, with the other permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, plus Germany, who are the signatories to this deal, if they start backing out of that, all of a sudden it calls into question the word of the United States elsewhere in other deals. Iran certainly has made this argument as well, and is making it directly to North Korea, which is, arguably probably the highest profile foreign policy issue that the president has dealt with. Certainly one that he has tried to champion the most through his first, I think coming up on 18, 19 months, something like that in office.
Okay, Lewis Nelson in Washington, thanks so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.